So today's lecture I call Words of Wisdom. And now here towards the end of the class, there's a bunch of random topics that I just like to go over. Now none of this will be used in any of your assignments or any of your quizzes. So if you're not interested, you're not interested. But again, I tried to put some helpful information in here just to understand the purpose of our class and everything going forward. So first thing, in this class, I tried to do more than just teach you what to think with C sharp and the language and the syntax. I tried to go to the next step and teach you how to think about a problem and solve it, with the idea that a software engineer doesn't just use the syntax. You have to understand the concepts to be able to solve the problems, which hopefully you heard me repeat a lot of times in this class. So kind of a different concept about even just why I teach this class, and it has to do with science literacy in the public. Well, what is science literacy? It's just science is a way of thinking and solving problems. And so if you're scientifically literate, you use science as a way of solving real world problems, just not our programming problems. Now, don't worry, I'm not going to get political or preachy or anything like that. We're going to be talking from a pretty high level. So, again, don't worry in that aspect. So, why did I want to make the public scientifically literate? Like, why do I teach the way I do? Well, there's advantages. So the more scientifically literate the public is, the more things in our society that people understand how to live in a pluralistic society. So, for example, people are willing to be wrong and accept new, better ideas based on evidence. If how you form your ideas are not based on evidence, well, then how can I convince you that you're wrong? How can you have one stance one day and a better, stronger stance the next if you're not willing to be wrong? And this is something all of us have to really accept. One of the things I pride myself on is that I will not believe something that is false for 1 second longer than I have to. I pride myself on changing my mind when new evidence comes along. And that goes for every topic. So it could be the best programming language, right? I've changed my mind over the years and understand that it more has to do with how it fits a given scenario. But again, that also just about everything in public that we've got going on in our political arena. Just try to follow the evidence and be willing to change your mind. So with the electric, again, remember this is computer science. So again, we want to use science to solve problems. And so as an electorate, how do you vote? Again, look at the candidates and try to understand their background and use science as a way to filter the best candidates for your ideas. And again, how you solve problems can affect this. And so the more scientifically literate a public we get, the less nonsense we have to sort of deal with our politicians because we'll vote them out. If you're a science denier, you have no business being an elected official. So again, as an electorate, we need to do that. Better moral and ethics. So again, if you're living in a plural society, I agree that we all want as much freedom as possible. However, there are certain things that we have to look at and take a step back in order to solve these problems. Again, I'm not going to get into these types of issues. I'm just saying that if you're willing to admit you're wrong, you're willing to look at things with evidence, you're willing to talk to authority figures on different things. We had a pandemic just go on. I'm not an authority figure on viruses, right? So you shouldn't be listening to me on your health advice when it comes to viruses. But you should be talking to people who are doctors or PhDs, not politicians, for your health rights. But if a politician has the backing of the scientifically literate and the people who lead those industries, then again, that's a reason to vote for a given public elected official. So more compassionate. This is a big one for me. Just showing just compassion to other people that we work and live with. And again, a quick example, just incarceration versus rehabilitation. It's a complicated topic. I'm just saying that when you show compassion towards people, for example, you will always save money rehabilitating people versus just incarcerating them. There's things like that. Again, just do unto others as you would want them to do unto you. I mean, it's a pretty easy type thing. So now let's kind of go on. And this next topic, as far as industry goes, just kind of stick with me. There's a reason here, and it has to do with things I get from students all the time and questions. So let's talk about hard work. Where I'm starting with this is just think about your background. Do you play an instrument, play a sport, or do you have a hobby like fly fishing, something that you almost consider yourself elite at? Could be anything in the world, anything that you have a topic that you have high knowledge on. So now, have you ever had a person say to you they wish they could play like you, or wish they had that talent, or whatever the thing is that, and to you, who's actually put in that hard work, how did you get that skill level? How long did it take? So when a person just says to you, I wish I could play the piano like you, well, that has real meaning to you, right? That they don't really mean that. They weren't willing to practice, 5 days a week for hours a day to get that same level that you are, or whatever sport or anything like that. And so people kind of think the same thing about computer science, that they could never do computer science. And I get a lot of students this, that they just don't have the confidence in them because it's really hard. Well, yeah, it's supposed to be hard. But most people, I say most because some people aren't quite built for computer science, or again, not going to even have the interest or the passion to continue on with it. But most people, I think if you work hard enough, you have the mental capacity to be a computer science major. Again, maybe it's not for everyone, but again, if you have just an average level intelligence, I think you'll be fine. So most students struggle. You are absolutely normal in this sense. So the whole point of this is that one day you're going to be a software engineer with 10 years of experience or 5, whatever it is, and people are going to come up to you and say, I could never major in computer science. I could never be a software engineer. That's just too hard. You are too smart. I'm dumb. I couldn't do that. But now I think it's part of your job now to hand over that mantle to the next generation to be like, no, 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 no. Please understand, I'm just a normal person with average intelligence who worked my butt off. And hopefully you kind of feel the same way, that my gosh, that degree should mean something, how hard you've worked and the things you've accomplished, not just born a certain way with certain talents. Which goes into this next concept of what I call mountain probable. Mountain probable is just a fictitious mountain that you come across. It's the hardest problem you have to solve. It's a large engineering problem. And so there's different ways that you can approach Mount Probable. So for example, some people will walk up to Mount Probable and just turn around, or they look at it from a distance and say, well, that's just impossible. So what type of person are you? Because I'll tell you what, almost always there's a different way to view that problem. For example, go to the back of a mountain, right? Or get really close to the mountain so you can understand it. Well, what happens when you do that? Well, suddenly it becomes visible that maybe you can climb the mountain, or you can use switchbacks on the mountain slopes one step at a time and hike up that mountain. I've hiked up some pretty serious mountains that when I looked at it from the ground, I thought there was no way I'd be able to get to the top. But with one foot in the other, when you take up these large problems, you break them down into small problems, it is amazing what you can accomplish. Think of the moon landing. There were so many people involved. It is such a tremendous accomplishment to mankind. But again, if you just stand back and look at the moon in a telescope, that looks like an impossible problem. But it's not. So hopefully you saw in this class, maybe there was assignments that when you first started them, and they just felt too large to really figure out. Well, that's not true. You learned that, right? You got perspective on how to solve these very large problems. And that's going to continue throughout your career as you solve larger and larger problems. So let's talk about your degree for now. So what is your degree? Like, why did you get this degree? The point is it teaches you a breadth of knowledge. Listen, if you just wanted to be a computer science guru, you don't need to take a bachelor's from a university. You could take tech courses, you could read books, you could do whatever. Now, unfortunately, most companies they want a piece of paper, but they want a piece of paper not just because you have computer programming experience, but because you have a breadth of knowledge. You are willing to work harder than the rest of people. Okay? Computer science skills aren't it. 90% of my job is not computer programming. Okay? I have to figure out how to solve a problem. I have to communicate that. I have to have meetings and budgets and schedules and tasks and designs and everything even before I even get to the code itself. That's why that breadth of knowledge is so important for you. Your degree teaches you how far you can push yourself. So you could accomplish things, again, that mountain probable, that you never knew you could accomplish before. So really, that degree has meaning, and be proud of it. So next, let's talk about the difference between a good, bad, and great engineer, because I've worked with so many engineers over the years, and I can put them in this category. Well, the first one, bad engineers, really, it's just they don't have the ability to solve problems. They need to be have their hands held. They have to give, in order to solve a problem, they have to be given the specific problem that's very small, and they have to have all the requirements in order to solve that problem, and then they can implement it. Where a good engineer, they can see problems, they can solve them by themselves. Where a great engineer can do all that, but they can also communicate to other disciplines about how to solve that problem. They also go the next step forward and they mentor other engineers. They're really passionate about the job, and you can tell the difference between a good and a great engineer by someone who doesn't just get their job done, but kind of goes the extra mile. So for your first job, listen, they understand that you're just an entry level coming into this. Now I know what it may say, on their applications or on their websites, that it may have just a ton of skills listed. No one has those for their first job. Do the best you can. Just apply anyways. The requisitions they put out, I don't even. I mean, I've seen entry level qualifications that I don't, qualify for. So it's just pretty mind boggling sometimes. But don't worry. Just if you're close, apply for the job. Don't worry about it. If possible, if there's an industry that you are passionate about, computer science will let you work just about anywhere. So if you're interested in cancer research, find a university that does cancer research. If you're interested in music, there's all kinds of software jobs in music or games, whatever it is. If not, try to find something that at least interests you. But I promise you, you'll find a job eventually. But if you get in an area that you enjoy, it's going to be a lot less like work. There's always going to be advantages and disadvantages to large, small, medium type companies. So with a large company, they tend to be competitive, generally good benefits. You have to live a lot more of the corporate nonsense. There's just a lot more red tape than a small company. Small company, it's hard. Again, it may not be as stable, but the pay maybe they have better benefits possibly. But you may work on something that's a little bit more exciting, less red tape. Again, it's just kind of a trade-off. There's no perfect answer. There's no perfect company. You just have to kind of do what makes sense for you. Nowadays, I'm pretty rare where I've worked at Boeing my whole entire career. I know other people that work a couple years and change jobs, work a couple years and change jobs. You need to figure out what's right for you. That's just kind of a reality. Getting a job or keeping one can be a lot about who you know. I got my first job because I had a friend in college whose mother worked at Boeing, and she let me know about an internship. At Boeing, there were times where I was close to getting laid off, but other teams knew about me. They knew how hard I worked, and so they asked me to be part of their team. So again, it helped keep my job also by people knowing who I was and then my reputation. Which goes along this next one. Be a person your coworkers respect and want to work with. This is such an easy one. Again, just be nice. I can't tell you, again, how many times I've seen people ruin their career because they were in a bad mood one day, or they didn't want to work with others, or they didn't work well with others. So be that person other people just want to work with. I promise it makes a difference in the length of your career. Try to make yourself known as the expert. It's hard. Sometimes we want to talk about ourselves and our skills, but I've kind of learned you really have to self-promote. And you want to make sure other developers know about your skills. And this goes beyond bragging. This is being honest and just being open and making sure people know what your skills are at. And so the day-to-day people you work with, they tend to figure it out. But again, outside your immediate organization, you have to communicate, especially with your manager. Your manager probably doesn't going to know your day-to-day tasks. And one of the things I found is that I constantly update my manager. Oh, hey, I did this. Oh, hey, I accomplished this. I just won this award, or whatever it is. I'm always letting my manager know because I'm not on the forefront of his mind. And I want to make sure that I am over time. This next one is some of the best advice I got from my mentor at Boeing. And that was to stay flexible. Now, the reason for this is it's rare that you'll just be a software engineer writing code at some company. That's just a fact. There's so many other roles in your job as a software engineer than just writing code. And a lot of programs go through different phases where you go like requirements and design and then coding and test and then deployment. Well, what do you do as a software engineer outside of those phases? Like, for instance, requirements phase. If you're flexible and you learn how to write requirements, then you're a needed asset during that phase. Now, the design and coding aspects, that's your wheelhouse. But what happens in between programs? Or what happens during the testing phase? If you don't know anything about testing, you're not flexible, or someone asks you, hey, can you help us run some of these tests? And you're like, sorry, I'm not a test engineer, I'm a software engineer. You're not being flexible. And there's times there are people who are gonna ask for volunteers on writing documents. You're not gonna want to write them. Do it anyways. I promise you, it'll all add up in the end. Whoops. So next one. This one's kind of a fun one. And so in our class, I'd like you to go back and just spend 10 minutes and look at your old assignments and see how far you've come. I promise you, if you look at your first couple assignments, you're going to be shocked at your coding skills and how far you've come in this class. It blows my mind to see students' progression in this class every single time, and I love seeing it. So please, just take a few minutes and go back. I promise you, you'll be shocked and almost embarrassed of your old code. And recognize that. Take a second and be like, oh my gosh, what has made my code contain the quality I really want to in these old assignments or the new assignments versus the old assignments. Keep in touch. I really like to hear from past students. Just send me updates if you've got a job, if you have any other questions, anything in general. I really do enjoy hearing about students and your lives and kind of where everything's taken you. In the future, I'm always here to help. If you have some questions about Weber State, job advice, it could even be health. I mean, just maybe you need someone to talk to that you feel like will give you a real honest opinion about just anything in general. I'm going to be here for you. I've hoped you enjoyed this class. Hope this lecture was helpful. Let me know if you have any questions.